Hi, and welcome to another Wednesday's Word. My name's Tim. I'm the pastor at Cascade Christian Reformed Church, and we've been reading the Bible together. We just started finishing the book of Hebrews, which brings us to the end of an amazing book. Hebrews is one of my favorite books in the Bible. It's like a whole literary arts course on how the Old Testament connects to everything about Jesus. So you start with creation, you see Melchizedek, you see Moses and Abraham, all the heroes of the faith, and how Jesus is better than all of them. And at the very end, they're describing that faith is that belief in things that we don't see, that God is certain in his promises, that his promises are, are binding. Last Sunday at our church, we were looking at when Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. When God says yes, he means it. So when he says he's going to save you, when he says he's going to love you, when he says he's going to forgive you, he means it. And faith means living that out. And then we get to James. And James seems like a sharp contrast. In theological terms, you're ending the epistles, and while James is a letter, it falls into the category of wisdom literature. So it's more like the book of Proverbs than it is the book of Romans. James is giving very practical advice. And one of the pieces of advice he has is about our faith. And what he's going to tell us is that faith without works is dead. Now, a lot of people find tension there because Paul says things like we're saved by faith, not by works, so that no one can boast. All this is from God. And so if we're saved by faith, not by works, how do we need works to prove our faith? So Martin Luther called the book of James an epistle of straw. He refused to study it. He refused to write a commentary on it. I think he even tried to lobby to keep it out of the Bible. But I'm glad it stayed in. And here's how it was described to me, and it makes a lot of sense once I understood it. Paul and James aren't debating each other. They're debating very different topics. And so imagine, if you will, two people who are debating, whatever an issue is. One person's going to sound extreme to one, the other is going to sound extreme to the other because they're in separate context. Paul's context is he's got a bunch of people who are legalists. In Galatia and a lot of the churches, he has these groups come in called Judaizers, and they're saying if you want to be a Christian, you have to follow the law. So it's not enough to have faith, you also have to have works. You have to be circumcised, you have to keep kosher, you have to practice the new moon festivals and all those other things. If you don't have those works, then your faith means nothing. And in that context, Paul's coming down very hard saying, you foolish Galatians, who's bewitched you? You're listening to a different gospel. One of my favorite parts of Galatians is he says, if you want to circumcise yourself, you might as well castrate yourself for all the good it'll do. And in fact, I wish you would. Paul gets a little salty in his old age. But then you have James, who's writing to a different context. He's not writing to people who are clinging to the law the way the Galatians and other people were in Paul's writings. He's probably writing to people who became very comfortable, very complacent. They had their faith and they didn't practice it. So he'll go on to say, what's it like when somebody comes to your door and you say, oh, be warm, stay safe, then you kick them out? That's not what Jesus would do. It's not what faith does. That's not what the kingdom of God looks like. You invite them in. You don't just say, oh, I hope all things work out for you. Thoughts and prayers. You take action. And that's the context James is writing from. So he's going to write very practical tips to help us take our faith, which is a free gift, not by works, but then turn it into something that changes our lives. Paul could be completely in agreement with this. He says that if you have faith, your faith is going to have fruit. And that fruit's going to look like self-control and love and faithfulness and all these other things. You're going to work out your salvation in fear and trembling. And so Paul also talks about works. And so James is being very practical, saying if you're a follower of Jesus, if you say you have faith, then don't just say there's only one God. Even demons believe that. They shudder, but they believe that there's one God. They believe that Jesus is God. They know Jesus rose from the dead. They know those facts. They're not changed by the facts. That's what's different about Christians. We don't just know the facts about Jesus and history and the cross and the empty tomb. Those facts change us. They transform our lives, and we're using those facts to transform this world. And so we'll discipline our tongue. We'll not speak boastfully or hastily. We'll show faith when we do work. It says, don't say, today I'm going to go to the store and buy and sell things. Say, tomorrow, if the Lord wills, I'll do these things. So keep everything with a hedge of God's sovereignty. And then he'll say, your faith without works are dead. If you're just saying, okay, I feel saved, but nothing in your life has changed, then maybe you have a bad feeling. Maybe the feeling is wrong. Maybe you need to dig in and do some work before the Lord and and beg him to give you a new heart. And so that's what Christianity is about. Christianity is about people who are changed by the living God. And so this week, I don't know where you are. You might be clinging to your good works. You're so busy for God. You go to Bible study fellowship, you serve at church, you do all these different committees, and then you wonder at night, are your sins really forgiven? Go read Ephesians. It's grace. You don't have to work for it. It's grace. But maybe, like many in America, you're very complacent. Maybe you're not tithing, you're not being generous, you're ignoring the needs of the people around you. That's why we need James. James is for people like me, people who live in a heated house with plenty of food in a world that's falling apart. And it's easy to ignore those folks. It's easy to ignore people outside of my little bubble. God's calling us through the book of James to put our faith into practice, because our faith, if it doesn't change us, it's dead. All right, that's all I got. Let me know if you have any questions. Until next week, God bless.